Hello, and thank you so much for joining us today. We are the Engineering Experts Group, and today we have John McDonald. I'm pleased to share with you that he's joining today. And I'd like to make a quick introduction about John, a specialist in the rail and transit industry. John McDonald is a global director in rail systems and national director for the U.S. rail and transit practice at Hatch Engineering, where he leads a staff of more than 200 rail systems and integration specialists working on over $40 billion in capital works projects in the six countries and around the globe. John holds a BS in electrical engineering from the University of Illinois, and an MBA from the University of Chicago at the Booth School. And John also holds 5 professional engineering licenses around the country. John, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate this. And just before you get started, I'd like to let our audience know that we will be talking about your professional history, projects you worked on, your role as a leader in the industry, and also your future vision. So if you want to go ahead and get started with what I'd like to talk about is your projects and the integration with agencies, your staff, your team. Let's go ahead and get started with that. Thanks so much for joining, John.
Thanks, Sally. So let's start with projects. I think I have had the really good fortune in my career to have some really fantastic projects, some of which very visionary in the industry and around the world, and others were interesting, not necessarily because they were visionary, but because they were a personal challenge. And I think that I always make that distinction, is because some are fantastic and noteworthy, and others are just personally really rewarding. So I think I've had the good fortune of being involved in 4 BART extensions now here in the Bay Area. BART is a pretty well-known agency here in the public transit space, and carries about 400,000 riders a year. And I think when I started working for them back in the early 90s, they weren't always so well known because they were kind of the BART folks used to joke back in the day, said, if you want to get someplace on time, don't take BART. To what it is today, right? Which is really the lifeblood of the Bay Area and how people get around. And so that transformation over 25 years or so is just absolutely astounding. Other projects like West Rail in Hong Kong, that was a grand vision at the time, and it was going to be a combined freight passenger rail system where we carry not only 2 million passengers a day, which for a single line is probably one of the highest in the world, regardless of location, and then also to carry an additional 4 million containers a year, which is about the equivalent of what Los Angeles puts through every year, through its entire port. So that volume of traffic, through a 19-kilometer hard rock tunnel and and all kinds of other challenges, was fantastic at the time, because it really forced you to think outside the box as how you were going to solve some of these technical challenges. And then other projects like Regional Express Rail in Toronto, which is still in the development stage, but the concept is fantastic, where you've talked about, how do I take an urban area that has a massive amount of growth, and what's the most efficient way to carry the people from point A to point B? Let's not talk about what's traditional. Let's not talk about things, but let's look at the overall cost to the population and the value that you're going to get out of it, and how do I do it? And they took what I always prefer, kind of euphemistically say, a mom and pop transit agency, with only 200,000 passengers a day, and really creating over the same infrastructure, with a bunch of upgrades, obviously, in technology and double tracking and different stuff, but taking that same almost right away and carrying 1 million passengers a day, right? So 5 times the number of people and it didn't create, you didn't use more land, you didn't use things, you created economic opportunity, and all the things you really want to do, but you didn't have to burden the city with extra pollution and 10-lane highways and all kinds of things. So it's just a fantastic vision of how you should deal with an urban area.
May I ask a quick question?
Sure.
So when you talk about Toronto, could you just give your audience a sense of the rail line itself in terms of the miles, or how big is
Sure.
this?
So Toronto, right. So Toronto's existing commuter rail system is about 500. I believe it's 500 kilometers long, and it's 7 different lines. One of which runs up and down the lake shore, and the others kind of move out into the suburbs. So it basically radiates in and out of Toronto. So Toronto Union Station is the hub of the entire Metrolink system.
Thank you very much. So when you capture, I mean, you have a massive amount of projects that you've worked on. You talk about Toronto, you talked about the West Rail in London, and you're talking about the Bay Area. Now, are you working currently with Hatch on the Toronto project right now?
I am not personally working on the project, but we have a number of folks working on different phases of the Regional Express Rail program currently.
And you sound very excited about it, because it sounds like, going back to your comment about the BART train and where it has moved to current, kind of, would you say it's becoming more of a state-of-the-art program that you've developed over time?
I think I always kind of look at it as public transit is really coming into its own. I used to joke, probably a decade or so ago, that we vote for public we vote for public transit in North America to get the other guy off the road, not for ourselves to ride, and therefore whatever we build is a little bit substandard. But as the population grows and the density increases in many of these urban areas, we're really starting to see people want a better public transit system, something that really works for them. And that's really exciting, because no longer do I vote for, just to get the other guy off the road, and I don't care how it gets built. So I vote for something substandard. Now I'm really voting to make it all integrated. I want to make it work. I want to make it work for me. That means I'm concerned about the time it takes to get on, to get the system. How do I access it? Where does it go? How clean is it? All those other things are, people are starting to really be concerned about. And that's fascinating, because you're really seeing that tipping point, right? As the industry matures.
Absolutely. And the engagement with the agencies is also a critical component for your relational development and growth with your teams. Right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. The agency really is the kind of the voice of the public, and how you get out there and implement these things and make them successful. So it's really, you always look at it as a true partnership, and between your position as part of the implementer of whatever system, and their vision and their understanding of how the public wants the services to be delivered.
Absolutely. So this is a great segue, John, for Hatch's initiatives relative to state-of-the-art technology. And perhaps you might want to speak a little bit about smart cities technology, because I think that's a good current theme that I think maybe our audience would like to hear about, particularly when you think about young engineers, people that are in the industry that want to embrace the excitement that you're delivering right now. So let's talk about the technology, please.
Sure. As you may be aware, Hatch is very big in technology. We pride ourselves in being innovative and on the cutting edge of all the industries that we're in, and we're intentionally, not in every industry. We're very limited to, mining, metals, energy, and the infrastructure. And of course, obviously, rail and public transit are about 80% of that infrastructure business. So I think it's very critical as we see the urban landscape develop, how technology plays a part. And so Hatch is innovative on a number of different items in the infrastructure space, all of which tend to be relatively near term. But one of the things that's really kind of exciting is really our effort in the digital space, where we're taking, we're building in the integration of projects and how they evolve into how they interface with the landscape, how they interface with the thing, and basically building what I would call term digital twins. And a digital twin, if you're not familiar with the terminology, is really it's a digital model of reality. And what that allows you to do is take reality, and especially in infrastructure space, when you're talking about billions of dollars of capital projects and stuff, and it allows you to do a what if analysis, right? In order to visualize what should be and what could be, and play around with it in the virtual world, much less expensively than trying to experiment when you actually build it. So these kinds of things have been fascinating in the industrial space, where we took a lot of the ideas from, when you're able to look at a plant and understand how a process plant works, and develop, look at the life cycle costs, look at the, what if I change this? If I change this arrangement over here, I can be more efficient, and then produce it according to that, without having to actually build it and test it and dink around with it later. So I think that technology is extremely exciting, because of the massive potential you can do with it. And in public transit space, if you think about a rail project in particular, right? And it interfaces with the city, and everyone thinks, oh, well, it's static, it'll be there for 30 years. But if you look at the urban space in and around it, and think of it as a dynamic and changing element, you really can start to look at those bigger questions that we've had trouble answering for years and years. What is the effect of urban transit on the environment? What happens when we do certain elements or build a project or do a thing? What's the effect on mobility? What's the effect on the thing? And then you start to launch into it on the day-to-day aspect of it. How do I deal with it in passenger flow, traffic flow, all of the things that you look at in an urban landscape on a day-to-day basis, and you can start to integrate all of those things. It's really quite fascinating, and we're very much at the cusp of this as an industry. We're starting to look at it, but it's just, it's like the next step, So, when I talk to kids coming into the industry, you say it's fascinating. In your lifetime, you're going to be able to do so much more than we ever could before. That you'll look back on this as look back on the stuff that you came into the industry as the Stone Age, because look at how much more we're doing now and how much improved the value statement is of the infrastructure that we're building as compared to what we used to build.
Right. So I had the pleasure of working on a multi-billion-dollar project, and one of the things that was, I think, important, and this is just another kind of segue, is you have your agencies that you're working with, and you're implementing new technology, and you also have perhaps a communication to your, I would say, your audience or your communities. And does all that work well? Because you're so progressive in your ideas. I would think that the writers, people would really want to know what you're doing. So do you feel like Hatch is a good communication program relative to this? And are the agencies up for the task of what you're trying to accomplish?
We find, all of this is possible. We think, a lot of big projects that gonna go south. one of the things that they don't do is communicating that vision, or what we call like value management, or benefits management, as I've seen it referred to in many instances, is understanding the benefits that you're going to get out of some of these projects. So it's great to have these great visions, right? And people and planners have wonderful thoughts and ideas about visions about what you're going to get out of this thing. But one of the failures that a lot of big projects have, because they are so long in duration, it's not unreasonable for a rail project to take 7 to 8 years to build, because of the complication, because you've got tunnels and large infrastructure and through an urban landscape, and you've got all the other associated goods with it. You lose, many times the people who came up with the vision aren't the people who finished the job. Frequently in between, you run into roadblocks and issues and stakeholder management and all kinds of other things that you have challenges with, and you make compromises, because that's what you do in order to get through a lot of obstacles and make those compromises. But what's important in those setting those compromises is making sure that you're managing the benefits that you wanted out of the job in the beginning, at the end. And where we find what is of value is being able to manage those things throughout the life cycle process. So process is really important in order to help you maintain those things throughout the life cycle of a project. And where Hatch can help, and what we've done for many clients, is really exactly that. It's getting the value out of the project that you envisioned at the beginning at the end of the job.
It's excellent, isn't it? It's excellent.
It is a real challenge, and it is probably one of the biggest challenges on any of these large infrastructure projects, because of all the host of issues that come up, and people and personalities and changes in people and personalities and different things over time.
It is a change. Yeah, it's constantly changing. And I think planning for change is probably an important element in your communication process with your teams and your
Absolutely.
agencies as well. So you just went through a merger with LTK, and I think it's a nice opportunity for us to talk a little bit about that, because that adds a larger group of people, much larger group of people to your existing company, so to your rail group. Could you talk about the LTK merger, please?
Sure. It just got announced here late last week, and so it's been quite exciting. It is a merger that is, I think, uncommon in the industry. People, you've seen a lot of big name mergers, and they tend to be acquisitions of, one large company versus, into another large company, and there's a big shakeup. LTK was different. It was really an integration of similar cultures. And I think that's when it happens, and it doesn't happen that often. It's really beautiful to see, because there really is a merger, and both sides of the organization, both organizations, so to speak, are very excited about the whole deal because of the opportunities. We come from a similar background. We're both employee-owned companies, and have a kind of a similar value and vision. We both have, a certain amount of innovation and technology that we bring. We're both relatively entrepreneurial. We have some skill sets that are very similar. So like my business, the rail systems business, there's, 100 or some odd of the LTK employees are in that business. And what's great about it is they're geographically diverse from a lot of what Hatch has. And so those instances, it's really great to have, a larger team implementing stuff with more clients. So we have more depth and breadth and reach, and but a lot of really enthusiastic people on both sides of the fence. So it's great to see.
Well, congratulations on that. It's a very large footprint in infrastructure, isn't it? So what's the future look like with these two groups combined? What do you think? Tell us about that. What your future looks like.
Well, it's hard to say, it's hard to say, what the future will bring. But I think what's exciting about this is you've got, more collective minds brewing up great things for the industry. And I think what the industry is going to see is not only is do you have all of the benefits of Hatch and all of the benefits of LTK, but I think combined will have the ability to bring new and exciting things to the industry.
Fantastic. So we're going to jump into you as a leader. So I'm excited to talk about this because your enthusiasm is really quite contagious. So talk about your role as a leader, and how do you stand out in the industry? I mean, you really are quite well known. So why don't you talk a little bit about that?
I will have to say I'm probably as shocked as anybody that I'm well known. I didn't really start out to be well known. I've done a lot of volunteer work with different organizations, but I think what excites me about the industry is that potential, that ability to tap potential resources that are underutilized in urban areas and public transit, and making it all work for people. That excites me on a daily basis, and technology excites me. Being able to innovate and do things better, faster, more efficiently than we have ever done before. And I think that all of those things excite me, and I see the potential within this industry. So I think that has always kind of been, for lack of a better word, my brand within the industry, and I've kind of latched onto that. And the fact that I'm well known is, I guess, a testament to my enthusiasm in that particular area.
That's great. So let's talk a little bit about your 10-point plan for success. And I think with this 10-point plan you have, I would just want to ask a couple additional questions while you're explaining is the integration of how you make this work with your population, your employees that work in your division. So let's talk about that for your listeners.
Sure. I think the 10-point plan, I don't know if I call it a plan. A 10-point evaluation is more what it really started out to be. Really was born out of frustration of the annual review. I think we all, as managers, we've all had to go through employee reviews. We talk to people, they set goals and plans. Half the time they don't work out, and not always at the fault of the employee, but because, circumstances have changed over the year, or they're not in a position to realize, some of those goals. But, generally speaking, we kind of go through the motions and, oh, well, that, I forgive you, that wasn't within your control, or, some other excuse. And I think, what I kind of looked back for, and I will credit Toastmasters actually as the genesis of this particular idea, or at least the adaptation of the idea. Insofar as, we came up with the ideas that, in general, the engineering consultants in my industry tend to have, certain things that we're all supposed to do. We're all supposed to win work. We're all supposed to make sure we get our paperwork done. We're all supposed to develop the business. We're all supposed to, do certain things. And then what you do is you create a 10 points, an evaluation system. And it's these general things, and you can achieve them in any way you want. And the goal is not to get them all, but to get, 5 out of 10, to at least be, that you're doing your job. You get 5 out of 10, and 5 out of 10 is usually relatively easy. It's not hard, but it allows the employees to adapt and change over the time. So if they have a particular instance where they perhaps have a personality clash with the client, they can't just, get through to this particular thing, and it's not their fault. It's just one of those odd personality clashes that happens, that they're not, a good employee is not going to be penalized for having that happen, during a year, but you can focus on something else, whether it's self-development or other business development or some other thing within that 10 points. And the idea is that, again, 5 is relatively easy. 7 is, somebody's really working pretty hard, and you get 9 or 10 points out of 10, then you're doing a fantastic job, and you should get an attaboy or some other kind of reward. And I found that to be much more receptive and flexible, because things happen during the year, and you need to be able to, one, monitor and make sure your people are doing the right thing, but also to incentivize them to focus on moving forward, instead of being stuck in a rut.
That's great. And you feel that now, one question I might have about it is, are they engaged? Like the managers have their own 10-point goals, or is it set up by you in your leadership under the rail, in the rail space?
We generally, I've done it a couple different ways where everybody has the same set of goals. And I've also done it where you've kind of bifurcated it to those who have client interactions and those who don't have client interactions. I think, because if you're a CAD, a CAD manager or something, you won't necessarily have the ability to interface and win work, but you're important to the overall organization. So perhaps you swap those things that were business development with some other requirement.
Fantastic. So let's jump over to your creative thought meetings that you have with your team. I hope I have that correctly titled.
Thought leadership.
Okay.
So
okay. Why don't you talk a little bit about that one?
So thought leadership is we have a discussion every 2 weeks or to a month, somewhere in that time frame. And basically the idea is just to simply get everyone talking about events in the industry and what we can do as an organization to, for those things. It's basically to get the creative mind and juices flowing so that we can be the innovators and things that we should be as an organization. And I think we've started to do this, and we started off with just my direct reports and everybody saying, but I've encouraged many of those managers to invite some of their more inspiring young people to the meetings and stuff, and they have great thoughts. It's amazing what you give a kind of a free forum of ideas, what people come up with, and it's led to some really thought-provoking articles. It's led to some new innovations. It's led to some other things. It's been a surprisingly successful effort.
Well, something that jumps out at me in this role that you have is that it gives you the opportunity to get to know your teams, and especially if they're inviting members in that you may not know otherwise. So that must be a great opportunity for developing professional relationships as well as growth in your technology. Is that correct?
We found that we found it is, I will not say it's solely because of the thought leadership discussions, but we have had a better retention of people. And I'm sure there are a multitude of reasons, but I'd like to think the thought leadership discussions are part of that.
That's great. So the other thing I wanted to speak to you about, John, is your leadership pipeline and succession planning, because I think members of the audience might want to know how that works for you and Hatch, because I think it's a key component for people to strive to be better.
Yes. So, I mean, I'm relatively new at Hatch, and Hatch is, and our group has actually morphed over the last 2 years. So it's, we used to be as a subset of rail and transit, and now we're our own individual, business unit, so to speak. And the difference has been actually quite remarkable. Under standard, rail and transit leadership, we had, a fairly traditional look at things. The pipeline was relatively stagnant. And I think as we've broken out, we've tried a couple different models. And I think what we're trying to do is not be so sedentary on the organization, and widen it up to make sure that people have leadership opportunities, and also to make sure that as some of our older established leaders in the organization have have the opportunity to train up their successors, and then also, if by chance they can move into a different role, and kind of allow some of the younger, more up and coming folks take leadership opportunities. But I think one of the failures I see in other organizations is being stagnant, and I think changing it up. Trying a few things that work, but always providing opportunities for people to show their leadership potential.
Absolutely. So, with regard to strategic planning and objectives, I'm just going to kind of jump around in this because it seems like it's a good segue. Mm-hmm. Do you feel as though do you feel good about your communication out to the teams so they kind of know where you are with the performance on a job or future planning? Do you feel like you're doing well at that?
We do. I would say okay. I won't say well is probably an overstatement. My ego isn't that big to think I'm all things. So we do quarterly meetings for all staff. And in that meeting, we kind of talk about direction in general, opportunities. We talk about our successes. We talk about where we need to improve, and I think that's important for everyone to understand. One from because if you don't tell people, they make up their own mind, and not always is that to your advantage. But the other is it helps align everybody as to where we're going and what we're doing, and you get, generally speaking, less objection. The worst thing you can have is have no communication, and then you have rumor mills starting about this and that and the other thing, and so I find in general, at least quarterly is necessary to have good communications with everybody to kind of explain where you're going, why you're going that way. And treat them all like adults.
Absolutely. So, John, the rail practice is changing all the time, and especially all over the country with different projects going on and changes, renovation, whatever. Do you feel as though you have a good mentoring program established because of the changes going on in the market and perhaps changes within Hatch that you're trying to improve on? Do you feel like you've got a good mentoring system set up?
We have a reasonably good mentoring system. I won't say we're by the best by far, but we do have a reasonably, there is a mentoring system within our organization. But I think one of the things that we've looked at is really, how to adapt the organization into brackets according to need. And I think what we're really looking at doing in our training and development program is actually start to perhaps bifurcate the organization into having really a focus area in the 0 to 5 year kind of range for some of our younger staff, and really doing a shift at that 5 year point into more of an established business. Consulting has tended to focus on only hiring. Either you bring in young engineers and they're always consultants, or you only hire established professionals, right? And I think you need to have that blended organization in order to take care of the needs of each, because we find a lot of I guess I've always been very big on making sure your engineers, your young engineers, get good experience early on, that they get hands-on experience, in the field, doing things, making sure they know how things go together, because 2 lines on the page that they draw is only 2 lines, but in the real world, those are 2 wires, or those are 2 ends of a beam that have to go together, and they really do have to go together in a certain way that aren't necessarily always represented on a drawing. And I think it's good for your engineers to understand and learn that early in their career, and then worry about focusing on the world of consulting and engineering, later, right? And I think what we're trying to do in our organization is really cater to that by having that kind of bifurcating the organization so that you almost have two careers at Hatch, one for the one in your early years, and then one when you're more established.
Mm-hmm. And some members of your organization probably have a preference for becoming a project manager or a preference to stay within technology, and I think that's an important, I guess, to honor them, what they choose to do and how they want to move in their professional trajectory. Do you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, not everybody is cut out to be the leading professional engineer, and not everybody's cut out to be a project manager, but the organization requires all of them to work. So I think it's right, and it's important to recognize that and let people choose where they want to be in their preference. And in fact, there's no shame in going back and forth. Many people can do both, and I think that's a great thing.
I think that's great. And it's expansive, it's not just myopic in your processes. Well, we've covered a lot today. We're talking about your professional background and what your contributions have been, your leadership, and you seem very excited about it. And now I just want to step into the future vision of what it looks like down the road based on your professional history and your leadership skills. There's been mentoring that you've had through the years. I'd really love to hear where you got your enthusiasm from.
I think my enthusiasm for the industry is really was more of a self-revelation. When I went back to business school, like 2001, no less, 2001 to 2003 or 4, whatever it was. I had the choice of looking, in other industries for opportunities, and of course, business school is, it's all, especially business school at the University of Chicago, is all about finance, and going out in the corporate world and doing all kinds of wonderful things. And here I was, an engineer and a public transit guy and all this stuff. And you have the opportunity to look at, the industry, whether it's, the airline industry or the finance industry and different things. And you'd say, what's your future, and looking at various things. And I think, what I decided at the time was to say, well, where's the opportunity? Where's the industry going? What's the growth pattern? Where do you see it happening in the next few years? And at the end of the day, you said, well, I can change industries. I can do something different. I can go into, investment banking, right? And I can do all, pay my dues and do all those things. But then I said, well, look, what could you do, and where would your trajectory be, if I went that path? And I think my choice was the path in public in the rail transit world. Really isn't that bad because of the transformations and things that were happening. And I think at the end of the day, I said, you know what, I think I'd rather stay and have, have some control over my destiny in an industry that I know, as opposed to going into a new industry where I'm going to have to learn all over again and do everything. So I think it was kind of a personal choice.
That's great. That's great. And having the combined background from University of Illinois and University of Chicago is fantastic. John, the rail market is in such high demand, right, for qualified people. And how do you attract phenomenal people to your company? Not everybody's going to have the exact skill set that you're looking for, because that requires growth and development change and technology changes. But how do you attract people? I can see how you attract with your enthusiasm, but how do you, as a company, attract good people?
I mean, Hatch has the blessing of having a very good name and reputation in the industry. We are, at least in the rail system side of the business, we are one of the very, very largest and most accomplished, detailed design groups. So if you're looking to do a lot of design work, we are a very attractive option. And because a lot of firms, they do either, quote, engineering consulting, where they wave hands over things and do, studies about things, or you do, construction management, or you watch somebody else do the work. And I think we are that blend of getting into the detailed design engineering. We obviously have construction managers. We do have people who do studies, but I think if you're looking at a much more detailed engineering aspect of it, Hatch is a very attractive firm. And then from that, because we're very strong in development, we have a very strong training program. We have a very strong development, and we've attracted some of the best names in the industry to work for us, and I think that shows. And good people want to work with good people.
That's exactly right. So let's just talk a little bit about college hires. There's a question that I have specific to this conversation around the engineering schools, and how do you think that do you feel that the schools are preparing graduates for a company like Hatch, or do you feel like you have to do a lot of training to get them prepared? I'm just curious about what's going on today.
I think there's a couple different things going on. One of which is that the rail transit business really has been kind of a small backwater for a lot of industries, right? And has not been attractive enough or had enough demand to be attractive to a university as a quote profession. So there's no real training and development programs in North America for rail and rail transit type of engineering. And so a lot of it's learned. And what we find is those folks who graduated from university that simply want to just do what they learned in university, or they want to go to Google, or they want to go other things, that kind of weeds out the people who don't want to go into rail transit. And it's difficult to hire. Because really what we're looking for is people that want to learn and learn, very traditional fields, but hopefully they'll, won't get disappointed along the way, because there's just a lot of learning to do before you really can be productive at some of the stuff. And it's not unreasonable to be 3-4 years out, and that is not always the most attractive thing, for a young engineer. So I think it tends to be the industry that is not as attractive to universities. So therefore the universities didn't, train people. But then it's, the university and making sure those graduates are really prepared, and not just, mentally as they've gone through an engineering program, but also prepared to learn to do new stuff. And I think that combination makes it really challenging.
Mm-hmm. So what we want to do today is get the word out, through this podcast, to get it to people who might be excited about hearing your story and your enthusiasm and the years that you have in the industry, to see the future. And that's a really key thing, is how can I see this down the road? Finished project or a participant on a huge $1 billion project is is absolutely wonderful. And so, having said that, about your college hires, when you do get teams in for different projects, do you feel like they have a good prepping? Like you talked about your training and you're happy about that. Do you feel like the integration of orientation for college hires is good? I'm assuming.
I think our program is good for, for college hires at Hatch because we've really made it that way. I can't say that it is for the industry. I would have to say the vast majority of the industry does a very poor job of integrating new hires, especially out of college.
But you feel good about Hatch?
Yes, and we've done so deliberately because we recognize that it is an industry where there's a declining number of people. There are declining number of experts in the industry, partly because of age. A lot of the, as we always say, a lot of rail and transit workers came in during the Vietnam War or at the end of the Vietnam War, which was 1975. Obviously, it's been a few years since 1975, and some of those people are retiring out, and they're taking their knowledge with them, right? And so if you hadn't had a big influx of new people since the 70s, 80s, and 90s, then obviously there's a lot of turnover, and that provides opportunity for young people. But we as an industry don't do a particularly good job of taking those young people and making them productive, making them understand the industry, and making the industry attractive to them. So it has been a challenge.
Mm-hmm. It's a lot of work. I know it is a lot of work. So before we wrap it up, John, we're in the space of your future vision. Is there anything else that you'd like to tell the audience about anything that we might not have covered today?
I think we've covered just about everything. I think the piece that I would like to impart is I think the opportunity within this the rail and transit business, so to speak, in the next 20, 25 years, 10 years even, is going to be absolutely amazing, in my humble opinion. Because of the new developments. If you could look at a lot of traditional industries that have kind of changed over with the new technology and digitalization of a lot of things, I think a lot of that innovation and complete overhaul of an industry is really looking at happening within the infrastructure space. It'll of course be different and it'll have its own flair, but it will happen. And I think that in itself is exciting. So if you're looking for, innovation and change and excitement and stuff with, a lot of new technology, this is a good space to be in.
Absolutely. I think it's one of the most exciting engineering, gifts that we have all over the world. And I'm just delighted that we had the time together. I just see you as a visionary. You've had tremendous success in the industry. You're at this very high level to be influential to a lot of people. And if people could be around you and just hear this and just grasp on to the excitement, it's hard work and it requires a lot of intelligence and focus. But, when they're on a design or on a construction project where they're implementing something for the public, I think that's very outstanding. And I can't say enough about it. And I feel honored that I've also been on rail projects as well. So I just want to extend my thanks and appreciation to John McDonald for taking time with me. My name is Sally Buckley, and we'll speak again.
Thanks, Sally.
Thank you, John.